"We're screwed." The words echoed across the battlefield as the elite SEAL team found themselves pinned down by enemy fire. No one expected salvation would come from the quiet student who had barely spoken during training. Yet in that critical moment, they watched in stunned silence as he took the shot that would change everything. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The helicopter blades whipped snow into miniature cyclones as Commander Travis Hale squinted against the biting wind. The Carpathian Mountains loomed around them, jagged and unforgiving, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. 4 days. That's all this mission was supposed to take. Secure the decommissioned facility, catalog any sensitive materials, and extract. Routine. Comms check. Commander Hale ordered, adjusting his tactical gear as the 6-man SEAL team disembarked onto the frozen ground. Their boots crunched through the fresh powder, leaving a trail of footprints that the wind quickly began to erase. Sergeant Owen Marston, Flex to everyone who knew him, tapped his earpiece twice before frowning. "Nothing but static, Commander. Can't raise base or extraction." The facility entrance stood before them, a concrete monolith partially reclaimed by nature, its Soviet-era architecture a stark reminder of Cold War tensions. What should have been an unlocked entry point was sealed tight, heavy metal doors engaged in full lockdown protocol. "This wasn't in the briefing," muttered Hale, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Rodriguez, try the override codes." 20 minutes and 4 failed attempts later, they managed to breach the outer doors using specialized equipment. The team moved through the corridors with practiced precision, weapons raised, expecting resistance. Instead, they found silence, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. "Sir," whispered one of the SEALs, gesturing toward a faint light spilling from beneath a door marked Research Wing B. Hale signaled the team to position themselves before breaching. When they finally entered, weapons ready, they found not enemy combatants, but a group of startled civilians, international scholars based on their identification badges. Among them, hunched over a chalkboard, covered in equations that resembled both advanced mathematics and linguistic patterns, was a young woman. Daria Mihalache barely acknowledged their dramatic entrance, her slender fingers stained with ink as she continued writing, muttering softly in what sounded like an archaic Romanian dialect. "Who's in charge here?" Hale demanded, lowering his weapon slightly but maintaining his authoritative stance. An older man stepped forward, his posture tense but dignified. "Dr. Alin Georgiou, we're conducting authorized research. May I ask why armed American military personnel are interrupting our work?" Flex moved closer to Daria's chalkboard, his eyes widening as he processed the complexity of her work. The graduate student finally turned, adjusting her glasses with ink-stained fingers, her gaze analytical and unnervingly calm despite the intrusion. "Your work wasn't mentioned in our briefing," Hale replied, a knot forming in his stomach. "Neither was the facility lockdown or the communications blackout." "Communications blackout?" Dr. Georgiou exchanged worried glances with his colleagues. Hale realized with growing unease that whatever mission they'd been sent on, the reality waiting inside these concrete walls was something else entirely. Commander Travis Hale paced the concrete corridor, his boots echoing against the cold walls. Something wasn't adding up. These weren't just academics taking shelter. They moved with purpose, with familiarity. The commander stopped before a bulletin board covered with security clearance badges, all bearing NATO insignias. "So you're telling me you're just visiting scholars?" Hale confronted Dr. Alin Georgiou, who stood protectively near his research team. "With NATO security clearances and access to a supposedly decommissioned facility?" The older scientist adjusted his glasses, a practiced calm in his voice. "We're conducting authorized research. Nothing more. Research that requires military-grade lockdown protocols?" Hale pressed, gesturing toward the sealed blast doors. Dr. Georgiou sighed, Commander, we're simply a think tank analyzing theoretical applications. The lockdown was triggered automatically, a system malfunction. The air between them crackled with tension. Daria Mihalache continued working at her station, seemingly oblivious to the confrontation, though her shoulders had visibly tensed. Sergeant Owen Marston moved methodically around the perimeter, his tactical gear contrasting sharply with the scholar's casual attire. The tech specialist pulled out a signal detector, frowning at the readings. "Commander," Flex called out, "we've got nothing. These walls are lined with Soviet-era signal dampeners. No comms in or out." Hale's jaw tightened. "Convenient." One of the younger SEALs whispered, "Sir, our briefing said this place was empty. Just sweep, secure, and leave." The commander nodded grimly. Their orders had been suspiciously vague. Secure a decommissioned facility, extract any remaining classified materials. No mention of civilians, scientists, or an active research program. Ilishka Novak approached cautiously, her hands visible. "Perhaps we can help each other, Commander. None of us expected to be locked in here either." Hale studied the Czech cryptographer's face, searching for deception. "What exactly are you protecting here?" Dr. Georgiou stepped between them. "Theoretical models only. Knowledge." "Knowledge worth sending a SEAL team for?" Flex interjected, his device still scanning fruitlessly for signals. The scientist's eyes darted briefly toward Daria, who remained hunched over her equations. That momentary glance told Hale everything he needed to know. Whatever they were hiding, the quiet Romanian student was central to it. "We need to see everything," Hale demanded. "All research, all communications, all access points." Now, as the scholars reluctantly began gathering materials, Flex approached his commander. "Sir, these interference structures aren't just blocking our signals. They're actively scrambling them. This place wasn't mothballed, it was upgraded." Hale nodded, watching Daria's methodical movements across the room. "Our mission brief was incomplete at best, deliberately misleading at worst." "So what now?" Flex asked. "Now we find out what's really happening here," Hale replied. "Before whatever they're hiding finds us first." Daria Mihalic hunched over her workstation, chalk dust coating her fingertips as she scribbled furiously across the board. Complex equations flowed from her mind to the surface with practiced ease, her lips moving silently as she worked through each variable. The arrival of armed strangers barely registered in her consciousness, a mere footnote compared to the elegant mathematical problem before her. Across the room, Ilishka Novak adjusted her necklace nervously, its hidden transmitter pressing against her collarbone. The Czech cryptographer moved between the scattered desks, squeezing shoulders and offering reassuring smiles to her fellow academics. "They're just following protocol," she whispered to a trembling colleague. "Military procedures, nothing to worry about." But her calm demeanor couldn't mask the growing unease permeating the cold facility. Commander Hale paced the length of the main laboratory, his boots echoing against concrete floors as his team secured the perimeter. The SEAL leader's patience was visibly thinning. "I need straight answers," he demanded, voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "Why wasn't this think tank on our briefing? What exactly are you working on here?" Dr. Georgiou stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "Commander, I assure you, our research is purely theoretical." "Save it." Hale interrupted. "Sergeant Marston, check those terminals." Flex nodded, moving toward the computer stations, while casting curious glances at Daria, who remained oblivious to the confrontation, lost in her calculations. The standoff between soldiers and scholars stretched into uncomfortable minutes. Ilishka attempted to bridge the divide, explaining their presence as an international academic collaboration. But her words fell on skeptical ears. The military men exchanged knowing glances. Something wasn't adding up. Then it happened. The first explosion rocked the facility with such force that chalk dust rained from the ceiling. Daria finally looked up from her equations, blinking as if waking from a trance. A second blast followed, closer this time, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. Contact at the main gate. shouted one of the SEALs, rushing to the observation window. Through the frosted glass, dark figures swarmed across the snowy valley, their weapons gleaming under the harsh mountain light. The facility's ancient alarm system wailed to life, red emergency lights bathing everyone in crimson. "Everyone down," Commander Hale ordered, his training taking over. "Move away from the windows." Chaos erupted as scholars scrambled for cover, knocking over chairs and equipment. Ilishka pulled a frozen colleague beneath a desk, while Dr. Georgiou frantically gathered research papers. The SEALs moved with practiced precision, taking defensive positions at entry points. In the confusion, Daria calmly closed her notebook and slipped it into her rucksack, her movements methodical despite the pandemonium surrounding her. For the first time since the soldiers' arrival, her eyes met Flex's across the room, clear, calculating, and unnervingly calm amidst the growing storm. The explosion at the outer gates had thrown everyone into disarray. Commander Travis Hale and his SEAL team instinctively reached for their weapons, but hesitated. Protocol demanded assessment before engagement, especially with civilians present. The attackers were advancing rapidly through the snow-covered valley, their dark silhouettes stark against the white landscape. While the soldiers calculated angles and risks, Daria Mihalice moved with unexpected fluidity. The Romanian graduate student, who had barely spoken 3 words since the SEALs arrived, reached into her worn canvas rucksack with practiced hands. From it, she withdrew what appeared to be a modified handgun, sleek, compact, with custom sights and an unusual barrel configuration. "What the hell?" Sergeant Owen Marston whispered, watching as she positioned herself by a narrow window overlooking the approach. Dr. Georgiou noticed too late. "Daria, don't!" But she was already in position, her breathing steady, glasses reflecting the cold winter light. The weapon, a customized sniper pistol she had personally designed for her doctoral thesis on the ethics of precision, felt familiar in her grip. She made 3 minor adjustments to the sight, accounting for wind velocity, temperature, and elevation. The lead attacker was 200 meters out, moving in a tactical pattern that suggested military training. Daria exhaled slowly, her finger finding the trigger with academic precision. The shot cracked through the tense silence, a single controlled report that echoed across the valley. Through the scope, she watched the attacker drop, clean, efficient, exactly as her calculations had predicted. The room behind her erupted into chaos. Ilishka Novak gasped, her hand flying to the transmitter hidden in her necklace. The SEALs stared in disbelief, not just at the precision of the shot, but at the source. "Jesus Christ," Flex muttered, slack-jawed. "Did she just—" Commander Hale moved to the window, binoculars raised. The remaining attackers had scattered for cover, their advance temporarily halted by the unexpected resistance. His expression hardened as he processed what this meant. The quiet academic had just eliminated a threat with military-grade precision, using a weapon that shouldn't exist in civilian hands. One of the younger SEALs, still processing the scene, shook his head in disbelief. "We're screwed," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't a security detail anymore." Daria lowered the pistol, her face betraying no emotion as she turned to face the room. The ink stains on her fingers seemed suddenly incongruous with the deadly skill he'd just demonstrated. "They'll regroup in approximately 3 minutes, she stated flatly, already reloading. "We should move to a more defensible position." The mission had just become anything but routine. The momentary silence after Daria's shot felt eternal. Blood pounded in everyone's ears as they watched the lead attacker crumple into the snow, his comrades scrambling for cover. The unexpected precision had bought them precious minutes. "Everyone to the central lab," Commander Hale ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. The SEALs and scholars retreated deeper into the facility, barricading themselves in a room lined with monitors and whiteboards covered in equations. Sergeant Owen Flex Marston immediately set to work at a terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Commander, you need to see this," he called, voice tight with concern. On the screen, detailed schematics appeared, targeting drones with neural network integration. The designs bore Daria's digital signature. "These are based on your work?" Hale turned to the Romanian student, suspicion hardening his features. Daria adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. "Parts of it. My thesis explored theoretical applications of psycholinguistic pattern recognition. I never intended—" "She didn't know," Dr. Alan Gheorghiu interrupted, stepping between them. The mentor's shoulders slumped as he faced his protégé. "NATO approached us 6 months ago. They saw potential in your algorithms." Flex continued scrolling through files. "This isn't just theory anymore. These drones can identify targets based on speech patterns, stress indicators, even micro-expressions." He looked up, face pale. "They're designed to predict hostile intent before action occurs." "Pre-crime targeting," one of the scholars whispered. Dr. Gheorghiu ran a hand through his gray hair. The ethics committee was divided. Some argued it could prevent casualties by neutralizing threats before violence erupted. And who decides what constitutes a threat? Eliška asked, her Czech accent thickening with anger. Who programs the parameters? An explosion rocked the facility, dust raining from the ceiling. Commander Hale checked his weapon, mind racing. His orders had been clear. Secure the technology and escort the research team. Nothing about autonomous killing machines that could target civilians based on how they spoke or gestured. "Were these deployed?" he demanded. The silence from Dr. Gheorghiu was answer enough. "2 test runs," Daria said quietly, her ink-stained fingers trembling slightly. "Northern Syria and Eastern Ukraine. Classified as peacekeeping support." Hale's radio crackled. His superior's voice came through, demanding a status update on the package. The commander stared at the device, then at the frightened faces around him. The true nature of his mission was becoming painfully clear. "Sir, we've encountered complications," he replied carefully, meeting Daria's eyes across the room. For the first time since landing in Romania, Commander Hale questioned not just his orders, but everything he thought he was fighting for. Commander Hale paced the cold corridor, his boots echoing against concrete walls. Every few seconds, his gaze shifted to Dr. Alan Gheorghiu, who was frantically backing up data to a portable drive. "I don't trust civilians in combat zones," Hale muttered to his team. "Especially ones who conveniently forgot to mention they're developing military-grade AI." The scientist looked up, his eyes reflecting both fear and determination. "You think we want this technology weaponized? We're trying to keep it contained. If those mercenaries get their hands on this system, the casualties will be catastrophic." Across the room, Daria Mahalake sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by printouts covered in equations. She hadn't spoken since firing that perfect shot, her focus entirely on the papers before her. The Romanian student's silence made her impossible to read. Was she traumatized by what she'd done, or calculating her next move? Sergeant Owen Marston drifted toward her workspace. Fascinated. "Those targeting algorithms, they're beautiful," he said, crouching beside her. "You've solved the atmospheric distortion problem that's plagued our systems for years." Daria looked up, studying his face before responding. "Mathematics doesn't take sides, Sergeant. The equations work regardless of who uses them." Her voice was soft but unwavering. Flex smiled. "Call me Flex, everyone does." He pointed to a sequence of numbers. "Did you account for wind variation at altitude?" For the first time, a hint of pride crossed her features as she nodded, showing him her calculations. Meanwhile, Eliška Novak casually stepped toward the communication station, her hand brushing against the ornate necklace at her throat. With practiced movements, she twisted a small component, activating the hidden transmitter inside. The Czech cryptographer's fingers tapped a quick sequence, a coded message to her contacts in the International Digital Ethics Coalition. Base compromised. AI weapon confirmed. Evidence incoming. One of the younger SEALs noticed her movements. "What are you doing over there?" "Checking for signals," she replied smoothly. "Perhaps we can boost our communication range." As the hours passed, the fragile alliance in the facility grew increasingly strained. "Doctor," Georgiou whispered urgently to Daria in Romanian, clearly concerned about her cooperation with the American soldiers. Hale intercepted coded messages between his superiors that contradicted his original mission parameters. Flex continued building rapport with Daria, genuine curiosity mixing with tactical information gathering. Everyone was playing their own game, forming temporary alliances of convenience while keeping their true objectives hidden. The only certainty was that no one in the room was being entirely honest. Not the scientists about their research, not the SEALs about their orders, and certainly not Aleshka about her transmissions to the outside world. The web of secrets grew more tangled by the minute. Sergeant Owen Flex Marston crouched over the equipment case, his fingers moving methodically through their gear. Something caught his eye, an anomalous blinking pattern on one of their targeting drones. He called Commander Hale over, pointing to the device's diagnostic screen. "Sir, this isn't right," Flex muttered, his brow furrowed. "Someone's piggybacked our signal. They're not just tracking us, they're controlling our own tech." Travis Hale's jaw tightened as the implications sank in. "The attackers have our protocols?" "Worse," the tech specialist replied. "They've hijacked the targeting system completely. That last explosion? It wasn't random. They used our own drone to map the facility's weak points." Across the room, Daria Mihalache looked up from her notebook, adjusting her glasses. She approached hesitantly, peering over Flex's shoulder at the compromised device. "May I?" she asked quietly. Flex glanced at Hale, who nodded reluctantly. The Romanian student's fingers moved across the drone's interface with surprising confidence. Within minutes, she had accessed subsystems Flex didn't even know existed. "The signal encryption has been overridden," Daria explained, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about the technology. "But I can rewrite the authentication protocols using a variant of my own algorithm." Dr. Georgiou watched from across the room, his expression shifting from surprise to unease as his mentee demonstrated knowledge far beyond what he'd expected from a graduate student. "Daria," he began cautiously, "where did you learn to?" "The same place I learned to design the targeting pistol," she interrupted, not looking up from her work. "My thesis wasn't just theoretical, Professor." Flex watched in amazement as Daria's fingers flew across the keyboard, writing complex code sequences from memory. "You designed this system?" he asked. "Parts of it," she admitted. "The psycholinguistic pattern recognition was my contribution. I never imagined it would be weaponized so quickly." Within 20 minutes, she had reprogrammed 3 of their drones, creating a closed network immune to outside interference. When she finished, even Hale looked impressed. "You're not just a student, are you?" the commander asked, his earlier skepticism fading. Daria's eyes met his, suddenly tired. "I am exactly what circumstances required me to become." The room fell silent as everyone processed the transformation happening before them. The quiet, ink-stained scholar had revealed herself as something else entirely, neither purely academic nor soldier, but something in between that defied easy categorization. Ilishka approached, placing a hand on Daria's shoulder. "We all wear different masks," the cryptographer said softly. "Sometimes we forget which one is real." As the reprogrammed drones hummed back to life, the boundary between those who created weapons and those who wielded them had never seemed more blurred. Commander Travis Hale stood alone in the dimly lit communications room, his jaw clenched as he read the encrypted message that had just come through. The new orders were clear. If the AI technology couldn't be secured, he was to destroy the entire facility, and eliminate all civilian witnesses. His stomach turned at the thought. He watched through the observation window as Daria Mahalache worked alongside his team, her slender fingers moving across a keyboard with remarkable precision. The Romanian student had proven herself invaluable in the last 24 hours, yet according to his superiors, she was now expendable. "Sir, we've secured the east corridor," Sergeant Marston reported, interrupting Hale's thoughts. "Daria showed us how to bypass the security protocols. She's something else." The commander nodded silently. Flex had taken to the quiet student quickly, impressed by her technical abilities. How could Hale explain to his men that they might soon be ordered to eliminate the very people they were now working alongside? "Keep the civilians contained, but cooperative," he instructed, his voice betraying nothing of his inner turmoil. Meanwhile, in the adjacent lab, Daria stared at the lines of code scrolling across her screen. Each algorithm, each elegant solution she had crafted during her years of research was now being weaponized before her eyes. What had begun as theoretical work, explorations into how machines could interpret human intent, had become a targeting system capable of identifying and eliminating threats with terrifying precision. "It was never supposed to be like this," she whispered to Dr. Gheorghiu, who stood beside her, his face etched with worry. Her mentor placed a hand on her shoulder. "Knowledge is neutral, Daria. It's what people do with it that matters." But the young woman wasn't convinced. The equations dancing across the screen, her equations, could soon be responsible for countless deaths. The logical part of her mind understood the military applications. The human part recoiled at the implications. Outside, another explosion rocked the facility. Elishka rushed into the lab, her normally calm demeanor shaken. "They've breached the western perimeter," the Czech cryptographer announced. Daria looked up from her screen, meeting Commander Hale's gaze as he re-entered the room. Something in his eyes had changed, a hardness, a resignation that hadn't been there before. She recognized the look of someone carrying an impossible burden. Two worlds were colliding in this frozen mountain facility: the academic pursuit of knowledge and the brutal reality of military necessity. As gunfire echoed through the corridors, Daria realized that her greatest battle wouldn't be against the attackers, but against the moral compromise threatening to consume them all. The whispers spread through the facility like wildfire. Matei Michalachi, Daria's younger brother who had vanished 18 months ago, was among the attackers. The revelation hit Daria like a physical blow, her normally steady hands trembling as she processed this impossible information. "Your brother is with them?" Commander Hale asked, his voice low and tense. "Did you know about this?" "No," Daria whispered, her academic composure cracking. "We thought he was dead." Dr. Gheorghiu placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Matei disappeared during field research near the Ukrainian border. There was no trace. Flex studied Daria's face with newfound concern. "This changes things," he said, exchanging glances with his commander. The tech specialist had come to respect her abilities, but this connection to the enemy complicated everything. Ileshka approached Daria privately while the others strategized. "Family loyalties are complex," the Czech cryptographer offered gently, "especially in our part of the world." Daria's mind raced through possibilities. Had Matei been captured, coerced, or had he chosen this path? The rational part of her brain calculated probabilities, while her heart ached with uncertainty. The facility's emergency lights flickered as the group moved through the eastern corridor. Rounding a corner, Daria froze. 20 meters ahead stood Matei, leaner, harder, with a scar across his jaw that hadn't been there before. Their eyes locked across the distance. "Go," she whispered to the others, stepping forward alone. Brother and sister met in the middle of the battered hallway, both hesitating before speaking. "They think I'm one of them," Matei said quickly in Romanian, his voice barely audible. "I've been undercover for 14 months, intelligence recruitment." Daria searched his face for deception. Why didn't you tell me you were alive? To protect you, he answered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. These people, they're after more than just the AI. They want the architects. They want you, Daria. She processed this information with the same analytical precision she applied to equations. The others don't know I designed the core algorithm. Some suspect. Matei pressed something into her palm, a small data chip. Extraction coordinates. There's a team waiting, but we have less than 6 hours. Commander Hale appeared at the end of the hallway, weapon raised but not aimed. Matei tensed. He's with us, Daria called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The SEAL lowered his weapon slightly, but remained vigilant. Trust was a luxury none of them could afford. As Matei prepared to return to his cover position, he gripped his sister's arm. Be careful who you trust, he warned, even among your colleagues. Daria watched him disappear around the corner, her heart simultaneously lighter and heavier. Her brother was alive, but their reunion had only escalated the danger surrounding them all. The explosion ripped through the corridor with a deafening roar, sending concrete and steel crashing down between the scattered team members. Daria Milalak found herself trapped on the wrong side of the collapse with Commander Travis Hale, dust coating her glasses and filling her lungs as she coughed violently. Status report, Hale demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. He checked his weapon and scanned their surroundings, the disciplined SEAL instantly assessing their predicament. We're cut off, Daria replied, wiping grime from her lenses. The main server room is 3 levels down. But these corridors weren't designed with navigation in mind. She listened intently to the distant sounds echoing through the facility. The commander attempted radio contact with his team, but only static answered. Flex, anyone copy? Frustration edged into his voice as he slammed the useless device back onto his vest. A burst of gunfire erupted from somewhere ahead, followed by the distinctive whir of automated defenses. The AI had activated its protection protocols, turning the facility's security systems against them. Down! Daria yanked Hale into a service alcove as a targeting drone whizzed past, its sensors scanning for heat signatures. The Romanian student's reflexes surprised the seasoned soldier. How did you know? He whispered, eyeing her with newfound curiosity. She tilted her head, listening to the subtle changes in the drone's engine pitch. The acoustics in these mountains have patterns. Growing up here, you learn to read echoes like others read weather. Her fingers tapped rhythmically against the wall. 3 seconds between sweeps. We move on my mark. Hale's skepticism was evident, but options were scarce. When Daria signaled, they sprinted across the intersection just as the drone returned, missing them by seconds. For the next hour, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors using Daria's unconventional method. She would pause, close her eyes, and listen to the reverberations bouncing through the concrete tunnels. 2 hostiles, northwest corridor, she whispered once. The echo pattern changes with human movement. The commander raised an eyebrow, but followed her lead. Sure enough, they avoided an ambush that would have caught them in crossfire. Where did you really learn this? Hale finally asked as they paused to catch their breath. Daria's expression softened momentarily. Matei and I played hide-and-seek in mountain caves as children. Our grandfather taught us to listen to the mountains. She checked her makeshift weapon. I never thought those games would become survival tactics. For the first time, Hale saw beyond the reserved academic to the resourceful woman beneath. He nodded with newfound respect. Lead on, then, he said, his voice lacking its earlier skepticism. Let's find the others. A faint smile crossed Daria's face as she pressed her palm against the wall, feeling for vibrations that would guide their next move. The unlikely partnership had just become their strongest asset. The ancient stone walls of the monastery crypt seemed to breathe with centuries of silent prayers as the group stumbled through the hidden Cold War passage. Daria Mihalach led the way, her knowledge of local architecture proving invaluable. The transition from sterile military corridors to sacred ground was jarring. Vaulted ceilings replaced concrete, and faint echoes of Latin hymns lingered in the air, recordings from a forgotten sound system. "This place was used as a fallback position during the Cold War," she whispered, her glasses fogging slightly in the damp air. "The government hid supplies here, beneath the monks' noses." Commander Hale nodded grimly, signaling Flex to secure the perimeter. The tech specialist moved with practiced efficiency despite his growing exhaustion. Alishka helped Dr. Georgiou lower himself onto a stone bench, the mentor's face pale from blood loss and exertion. "We can rest, but not for long," Hale cautioned, checking his ammunition. "They'll figure out where we went." Matei appeared from a side passage, startling everyone. "3 exits," he reported quietly to his sister. "All partially collapsed, but passable." The brief moment of sanctuary shattered when the first bullets ricocheted off ancient stone columns. The attackers had found them faster than anticipated. The Romanian student instinctively pulled her mentor behind a thick stone altar as the SEALs returned fire. "This is consecrated ground," Alishka protested, ducking behind a fallen beam. "We shouldn't." "Tell them that," Flex interrupted, wincing as stone fragments showered his position. Daria closed her eyes momentarily, her lips moving in what might have been prayer or calculation. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression. "My grandmother told stories of Pakala," she said suddenly, her voice steady despite the chaos. "A simple shepherd who outwitted emperors and demons alike." She grabbed Matei's sleeve, whispering rapidly in Romanian. He nodded, understanding immediately, and disappeared into the shadows. "What are you planning?" Hale demanded, between bursts of covering fire. "Pakala never won through strength," she explained, pulling components from her backpack. "He won by making his enemies defeat themselves." Working with practiced hands, she assembled a crude device from spare parts. The cryptographer recognized the intention immediately and helped redirect the ancient monastery's speaker system. When the attackers pushed forward into the main chamber, they were met not with resistance, but with an unholy cacophony, Latin chants amplified to deafening levels, bouncing off stone walls in disorienting patterns that made targeting impossible. In the confusion, Daria led the group through a passage behind the altar, a route known only to those who had studied the monastery's original blueprints. "Sometimes," she whispered as they escaped, "the quietest solution is the loudest one." Blood dripped from Dr. Alan Georgiou's arm as he staggered away from the smoking server rack. His desperate gambit to disable the AI had cost him. A jagged piece of metal had sliced deep into his flesh when the system's defensive protocols had triggered an electrical surge. "It's done," he gasped, pressing his lab coat against the wound. "The main server is offline." Commander Hale nodded grimly, helping the older man to a nearby chair. The brief moment of relief, however, evaporated as the emergency lights suddenly flickered back to life. A low hum resonated through the facility's concrete walls. "That's impossible," Dr. Georgiou whispered, his face ashen. "Unless—" All eyes turned to Daria Mihalike, who stood frozen, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as realization dawned. "My drive," she said, her voice barely audible. "My personal research drive. I always keep backups of my work." Flex approached the nearest terminal, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. "The system's rebooting from an external source. It's using your architecture, Daria." The Romanian student rushed to his side, pushing her glasses up with ink-stained fingers. "I never intended this. The backup contains all my original algorithms, the ones I designed before the military applications." A mechanical whirring echoed through the ventilation system as dormant drones began powering up throughout the facility. On the monitor, biometric scanners activated, displaying heat signatures of every person in the complex. "What's happening?" Alishka asked, her hand instinctively touching the hidden transmitter in her necklace. "The AI is targeting based on stress signatures," Daria explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's identifying elevated cortisol and adrenaline levels. It can't distinguish between friend or enemy." A drone buzzed past the doorway, its targeting laser sweeping the room. "Can you shut it down?" Commander Hale demanded, his hand moving to his weapon. Daria nodded, her face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. "I can. The architecture was built around my original code. I'm the only one with full override access." Dr. Gheorghiu looked at his protege with a mixture of pride and regret. "I always said your mind would change the world, Daria. I never imagined it would be like this." Outside, they could hear shouts as both attackers and defenders became targets for the awakened system. The AI, designed to identify threats based on psychological markers, now viewed everyone's fear as aggression. "How much time do you need?" Flex asked, positioning himself protectively near Daria. She took a deep breath, steadying her hands. 4 minutes, maybe 5. "We don't have 5 minutes," Hale said, as the drone returned, its targeting laser painting red dots across their chests. The rumble of explosions grew closer as the rogue militia advanced through the facility's outer defenses. Commander Hale pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, signaling his team to hold position. Through the fractured security feed, they could see at least 20 armed operatives methodically sweeping each corridor. "They're not just looking to destroy," Travis muttered, studying their tactical formation. "They want the system intact." Daria Mihaliki crouched beside him, her glasses sliding down her nose as she analyzed the enemy's movement patterns. "They're following the power conduits," she whispered. "They know exactly where the server room is located." The SEALs exchanged grim looks. Their orders were clear: secure the AI technology and deliver it to NATO command. But the weight of what they'd discovered made those orders feel increasingly hollow. "We need to move," Sergeant Marston insisted, adjusting his damaged comms unit. Flex's eyes kept darting toward Daria, concern evident in his expression. The bond that had formed between the tech specialist and the Romanian student was unmistakable. Meanwhile, in a small communications alcove, Ilishka Novak's fingers flew across a salvaged terminal. The Czech cryptographer had managed to bypass 3 layers of security protocols, giving her access to classified deployment records. What she found made her blood run cold. "My God," she breathed, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screen. Dr. Gheorghiu moved to her side, his expression darkening as he scanned the data. "The prototype was already field-tested," Ilishka said, her voice barely audible. 2 villages, one in eastern Ukraine and one in—" She paused, swallowing hard. "Northern Czechia, my village." The memory crashed over her. The unexplained drone activity, 3 months ago, followed by precision strikes that authorities had attributed to separatist forces. 43 civilians dead, including her cousin's family. "It wasn't random," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "They were testing the targeting algorithms on real people." Dr. Gheorghiu placed a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off violently. "Did you know?" she demanded. The older scientist looked away, his silence damning. Ilishka wiped her eyes, determination hardening her features. She reached for the transmitter hidden in her necklace. "The world needs to know what happened here," she said. "What's still happening?" A fresh explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling as Commander Hale called for everyone to regroup. "We're out of time," he announced. "Whatever your personal feelings, that technology cannot fall into their hands." Daria glanced at Ilishka, understanding passing between the 2 women. The truth had to survive, even if they didn't. The wind howled through the damaged corridor as Daria Mihalice hunched over the facility's auxiliary terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, reprogramming the AI's heat-mapping algorithm on the fly. The others huddled behind her, watching in tense silence as she worked. "I can create ghost signatures," she explained, not looking up. "The drones will chase shadows while we move." Her glasses reflected the blue glow of the screen, face set in concentration. Commander Hale nodded grimly. "How long will it buy us?" 20 minutes, maybe less." Daria's voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she executed the final command. The terminal beeped in confirmation, and she allowed herself a brief smile. The victory was short-lived. As the group prepared to move, an error message flashed across the screen. Daria's face drained of color. "What is it?" Flex asked, leaning closer. "The system, it's purging all external drives to protect itself." Her voice cracked. "My research, everything I've worked on for 5 years, it's being wiped." Dr. Georgiou placed a hand on his student's shoulder. "Daria, we must go." She stared at the screen, watching years of work vanish line by line. More than data, it was her life's purpose, her contribution to the world. The Romanian student swallowed hard, then nodded. Some sacrifices couldn't be measured. They moved swiftly through the labyrinthine passages, guided by Alishka's memory of the facility blueprints. The Czech cryptographer led them toward an emergency exit, her necklace transmitter still sending coordinates to her whistleblower contacts. The distinctive whine of approaching drones echoed through the corridor ahead. Sergeant Marston reached into his pack, pulling out a cylindrical device, cobbled together from spare parts. "Everybody down," he shouted, activating the improvised EMP grenade based on Daria's earlier schematics. The blast came with a blinding flash and a wave of pressure that knocked them all backward. The drones dropped from the air, their electronic systems fried. When the dust settled, Daria crawled to Flex, who lay motionless against the wall. Blood trickled from his ears. "Owen," she called, using his real name for the first time. The tech specialist blinked, disoriented. "I can't." He touched his ears, panic flashing across his face. "I can't hear anything." Hale helped his teammate to his feet. The EMP was too close, the blast wave. Flex nodded grimly, understanding without hearing. He tapped his chest and pointed forward, soldier sign language for "I'll manage." Daria watched him, the weight of another cost settling on her shoulders. Her research was gone. Flex's hearing was gone. What else would they lose before this ended? The group pressed on, each step forward purchased with pieces of themselves they could never reclaim. Huddled in a small storage room, the team found a moment of respite from the chaos outside. The dim emergency lights cast long shadows across their weary faces as they tended to wounds and checked remaining ammunition. Commander Travis Hale sat beside Daria Mihalici, both of them leaning against the cold concrete wall. "I never told anyone on the team why I enlisted," he said, breaking the heavy silence. His voice was barely above a whisper. "My younger brother was a humanitarian worker in Eastern Africa. Smart kid, wanted to change the world." The commander's eyes fixed on a distant point. He was killed 3 years ago in a civilian drone strike. Collateral damage, they called it. Daria looked up from her weapon, her attention fully captured. "That's why these orders don't sit right," Hale continued. "I joined to prevent tragedies like that, not cause them. Now they want us to destroy everything, including witnesses." He glanced at the Romanian student. "Including people like you." She nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his confession. "We all have our ghosts," she replied, her English precise but accented. "My parents believed knowledge was sacred. They taught at the university until the economic collapse." Her hands trembled slightly as she methodically reloaded her customized pistol. The familiar motion seemed to ground her as she began softly reciting what sounded like a poem or song in Romanian. "What is that?" Flex asked from across the room, his good ear turned toward her. "A lullaby my grandmother sang," Daria explained, "about a clever fox who outsmarts the hunters in winter." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "She told me intelligence always overcomes brute force." Ilishka moved closer, offering Daria a sip from her water bottle. "My village elders had similar stories before the drones came." The Czech cryptographer's words hung in the air, a stark reminder of what they were fighting against. Dr. Georgiou, bandaged and pale in the corner, avoided everyone's eyes. Daria clicked the magazine into place with finality. "I designed algorithms to understand language patterns, not to kill people using those patterns." Her voice hardened. "Every equation I wrote, every breakthrough, all of it weaponized. Commander Hale studied her face. The reserve student he'd initially dismissed now revealed depths of resolve he recognized from his own mirror. "We have 2 hours before they breach this section," he said, checking his watch. "Whatever happens next, I want you to know I respect what you're doing here." Daria met his gaze. "And I understand why your orders trouble you, Commander." In that moment of shared vulnerability, the walls between soldier and scholar, between duty and conscience, seemed thinner than ever before. The tunnels stretched before them like the veins of a dying beast, rigged with Cold War-era tripwires and pressure plates. Commander Travis Hale led what remained of their battered group. 3 SEALs, Daria Mahalike, Dr. Georgiou, and Elishka, through the labyrinthine escape route. Blood stained his tactical vest, though he couldn't remember whose it was anymore. 2 more kilometers to the eastern exit, Daria whispered, her glasses reflecting the dim emergency lights. She moved with surprising confidence for someone who had spent most of her life in laboratories rather than combat zones. A muffled explosion rocked the tunnel ahead. Matej Mahalike appeared from the shadows, his militia disguise torn and bloodied. "They've sealed the main exit," he reported, embracing his sister briefly. "But I've diverted them with false intel. We have 20 minutes, maybe less." Flex, his hearing now permanently damaged from the EMP blast, watched Matej's lips carefully. "What about the secondary route through the monastery crypts?" "Heavily guarded," Matej replied. "But I can create a diversion." Dr. Georgiou shook his head. "Too dangerous. The AI's targeting systems are still partially operational." Daria's fingers flew across her tablet. "The system's tracking our heat signatures through the old ventilation system. We need to bypass the final failsafe, but it requires dual authentication." Hale nodded grimly. "You and me, then." The group pushed forward until they reached a sealed security door. Beyond it lay their only chance of escape. Daria connected her device to the ancient terminal while Hale covered her. Their partnership, forged in blood and distrust, had evolved into something neither had anticipated: mutual respect. "I need your biometric scan," she said, not looking up from her work. "The system requires both military clearance and developer access." As Hale pressed his palm against the scanner, Matej's radio crackled. "They've discovered my sabotage. 3 minutes until they reach our position." Elishka took up position at the corridor junction, weapon ready. "I'll buy you time." The Czech cryptographer's determination was evident in her steady hands. This woman who had lost her village to the very technology they were fighting. Daria's code sequences flashed across the screen as Hale watched in silent admiration. The quiet student who had shocked them all with a single shot was now their only hope. "Almost there," she muttered, fingers dancing across keys. "The AI is fighting back." A red warning flashed. The system had locked onto their stress signatures. "We're out of time," Hale said, his voice tight. Daria looked up at him, her eyes reflecting both fear and resolve. "Trust me," she said simply. The commander nodded. Their lives now hung on the intellect of the woman he had once dismissed as just another civilian. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The AI's targeting systems locked onto their stress signatures with merciless precision. Red dots danced across Daria Mahalich's tablet screen as the algorithm identified each escapee by their elevated cortisol levels. Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked, the code before her both familiar and alien, her creation, yet weaponized beyond recognition. "We have 4 minutes before it completes the targeting cycle," she announced, her voice steadier than her hands. The graduate student glanced up at the faces around her, soldiers and scholars alike now depending on her expertise. Commander Hale crouched beside her, watching the screen with grim focus. "Can you shut it down? I designed the framework, but they've built walls I never intended," Daria replied. "I need administrative access." Dr. Georgiou limped forward, blood seeping through his makeshift bandage. The mentor's face was ashen as he handed her a small data key. "This will get you in." As she worked, Flex positioned himself at the doorway, his damaged hearing making him rely on visual cues. The tech specialist signaled that they still had a clear path, for now. "Why does it recognize your credentials?" Daria asked suddenly, the question that had been gnawing at her finally breaking through. The older scientist couldn't meet her eyes. "Because I submitted your research to NATO 14 months ago, without telling you." The revelation hit her like physical pain. "You had no right. I believed it would prevent greater conflicts," he whispered. "Controlled deployment of your targeting algorithms could save countless lives." Ilishka, monitoring communications nearby, looked up sharply. "Like in my village? Was that a controlled deployment?" Daria's mind raced through every possibility. The AI she'd designed to identify linguistic patterns in academic research had been perverted into a weapon that could target anyone based on stress responses alone. Her life's work, meant to advance knowledge, now threatened to become the most sophisticated killing tool in history. "I can't stop it," she finally said. "But I can corrupt it." Matej placed a hand on his sister's shoulder. "What will that cost you?" "Everything," she answered simply. "My research, my thesis, 5 years of work." Commander Hale studied her face. "Are you certain?" Daria nodded, already typing furiously. She was inserting fatal contradictions into the core algorithm, mathematical impossibilities that would force the system to devour itself. The Romanian student who had once dreamed of academic recognition was deliberately destroying her greatest achievement. "It's done," she said moments later, closing the tablet. "We have 2 minutes to clear the sector before it cascades through the network." As they moved out, Daria felt strangely light. For the first time since the quiet graduate student had pulled that trigger, she knew exactly who she was. The countdown timer blinked red as Daria Mihalich's fingers moved with surgical precision across the explosive device. Her glasses reflected the pulsing light, while the AI's targeting systems locked onto their biological signatures one by one. 3 minutes, she announced, her voice steadier than her hands. The irony wasn't lost on her, destroying what she'd spent years creating. Her algorithm, designed to save lives through predictive analysis, now threatened to end them all. Commander Hale positioned himself at the corridor junction, rifle raised. "We need to move, now." His eyes met Daria's briefly, conveying a respect that had been hard-won over the past 8 days. "Almost there," she whispered, bypassing the final failsafe. The young Romanian had never imagined her thesis would become a weapon, nor that she would be the one to destroy it. As she worked, Flex monitored the enemy's approach on his damaged tablet, wincing each time he missed audio cues due to his newly acquired hearing loss. "They're converging on the east wing," Ilishka reported, her necklace transmitter now serving as their only reliable communication device. The Czech woman's face was drawn with exhaustion, but determination burned in her eyes. Dr. Gheorghiu limped toward his former student, blood seeping through his makeshift bandage. "Daria, there might be another way." "There isn't." Her voice cut through his plea. "You made that choice when you gave my work to NATO without telling me." The facility shuddered as another explosion rocked the mountain. Chunks of concrete rained down from the ceiling. Daria connected the final wire and stepped back. 2 minutes to clear the blast radius, she announced, rising to her feet. The group moved through the labyrinthine corridors with practiced urgency. Matej took point, his knowledge of the attacker's patterns proving invaluable. Brother and sister exchanged a wordless glance as they passed. A lifetime of understanding, compressed into a single moment. They burst through the emergency exit into the bitter mountain air just as the first detonation sequence began. The ground beneath them trembled violently. Behind them, years of research, ethical compromises, and military ambition collapsed into the mountain. Daria watched as the facility, and with it her life's work, disappeared forever. The acrid scent of ozone mixed with snow filled her nostrils. Something inside her broke, but something else, something stronger, remained intact. "Move!" Hale shouted as an avalanche of snow and debris cascaded down the mountainside. The survivors scrambled through shifting paths, the rumbling earth threatening to swallow them whole. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, miles from the destruction, Daria stared back at the altered landscape. The mountain had reclaimed its secrets, burying the AI, her research, and countless ethical transgressions beneath tons of rock and snow. "Was it worth it?" Flex asked quietly. Daria's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "Ask me tomorrow," she replied, her idealism battered but not extinguished. "If we live that long." Dawn painted the Carpathian skyline in hues of amber and gold as Daria Mihalic and the survivors emerged from the mountain's shadow. 9 days had passed since their ordeal began. 9 days that had transformed them all. Their clothes were tattered, faces gaunt, and spirits worn thin by the weight of what they'd experienced underground. Commander Travis Hale walked slightly apart from the group, his shoulders rigid despite his exhaustion. The military man knew what awaited him back in civilization: a court-martial for disobeying direct orders, for choosing human lives over military objectives. Still, his eyes revealed no regret when they briefly met Daria's. Sergeant Owen Marston trailed behind, occasionally turning his good ear toward sounds only he could partially detect. The explosion that had saved them had claimed his hearing in one ear and damaged the other. The tech specialist kept tapping his devices out of habit, though they had long since died. "I can help you design an amplification device," Daria offered quietly, watching Flex struggle. "Something better than standard hearing aids." He smiled weakly. "Already thinking about the next project?" Nearby, Elishka Novak sat on a fallen log, meticulously organizing the data she'd managed to salvage. The Czech cryptographer's fingers moved with purpose across her tablet, the only functioning electronic device among them. Her village deserved justice, and the world needed to know what had been done in the name of security. "Will your evidence be enough?" Dr. Georgiou asked, his mentor's voice now carrying a hint of shame. "It has to be," the cryptographer replied, not looking up. Matei approached his sister with a handful of broken ceramic pieces he'd salvaged from the monastery ruins. The pieces were painted with faded patterns, remnants of what might have been a religious artifact or simple dishware. Without a word, he sat beside Daria and began arranging them in a pattern. Daria recognized the game immediately, one they had played as children during the long Romanian winters when electricity was scarce. Her fingers, still stained with ink and gunpowder, joined his in creating a mosaic from broken things. "Remember the rules?" Matei asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Make something beautiful from what's broken," she replied, completing the childhood mantra they had invented. Around them, the survivors watched the siblings' quiet ritual, finding comfort in this small reclamation of innocence. The bonds forged in those 9 days of hell had become something unbreakable, a compass pointing toward an uncertain future they would navigate together. As the morning light strengthened, they rose to continue their journey down the mountain, carrying with them not just physical scars, but a shared understanding that would never translate into official reports or debriefings. The morning sun glinted off the pristine snow as they trudged through the Carpathian wilderness. Their footprints carved a ragged path behind them, evidence of their survival against impossible odds. Daria Mihalic walked slightly apart from the others, her posture no longer hunched over equations, but straight-backed and resolute. The weight of her decisions had transformed her more than any academic achievement ever could. Commander Hale signaled for the group to pause at a ridge overlooking the valley. From this vantage point, the smoking ruins of the facility were barely visible, a dark scar on the white landscape. The SEAL leader's face was haggard, the weight of his potential court-martial evident in the new lines around his eyes. "We should reach the extraction point by nightfall," he said, his voice carrying in the mountain air. Flex adjusted his makeshift hearing aid, fashioned from spare parts after the EMP blast, and nodded. The tech specialist's sacrifice had saved them all, though he would never hear clearly again. Beside him, Elishka clutched her necklace, the transmitter now empty of its secrets, but heavy with purpose. The Czech cryptographer had already composed the message that would expose the AI's misuse to the world. Dr. Gheorghiu leaned heavily on a makeshift crutch, his betrayal of Daria's trust still hanging between them like an invisible wall. Yet they had survived together, their complicated relationship forever altered by fire and fear. Matej moved to his sister's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. The siblings exchanged a glance that contained volumes: their childhood, their separation, and their unlikely reunion amid chaos. For 9 days, they had fought, bled, and strategized. The quiet student who had once been dismissed as merely bookish had proven herself the linchpin of their survival. The SEALs, trained warriors who had entered the mission with confidence bordering on arrogance, had been humbled by her intellect and courage. As they prepared to continue their journey, Daria suddenly stopped. She turned to face the group, her glasses catching the sunlight. For the first time since they'd met her hunched over that chalkboard, she spoke without hesitation or calculation. "Next time," she said, her voice clear and resonant in the mountain air, "don't freeze." The simple phrase hung between them, an admonishment, a lesson, and perhaps even a joke. Commander Hale's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Flex actually chuckled. The other SEALs, hardened, humbled, and profoundly changed, simply nodded. In the silence that followed, as they resumed their trek through the snow, it was clear that knowledge, courage, and quiet resolve had altered not just the course of their mission, but perhaps the world itself. And Daria Mahalache, once just the quiet student, had become their unlikely teacher.